you to everyone who's joining today on this webinar on choosing a serious journal to publish your research. And my name is Caroline. I'll be speaking in just a moment, but I'd like to begin by giving the floor to Dr. Mittal. Dr. Mittal.
Pani?
Yes.
Or Dr. Pani, I apologize. Floor is yours.
Yes. Okay. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. So can we start, ma'am, formally?
Yes, you can.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody, and esteemed Secretary General Dr. Pankaj Mittal, madam, and the speakers today, Professor Atul Khosla, Honorable Vice Chancellor of Sulini University. Then we have other speakers, Dr. Caroline Sutton, the CEO of STM, with whose collaboration only this program is being organized. And we have speakers like Barbara Columnus, and the main speaker we have today is Catherine Stephen, who is the guest speaker. In fact, all these guests today, the basic background of this event or the seminar today is that the publication as a sector in higher education, though it's increasing by its volume and size, many of the times the publishing houses, and because of their commercialization and competition and the uprising of many predatory journals, the quality of publication somehow is in one of the areas of concern. So most probably the researchers, even the young writers, the young faculty members, they often find confusion and difficulty in writing, even drafting a proper research paper or a popular article even. They need some kind of guidance, and they also need some kind of guidance about selecting a right kind of journal for their own writings, for submission of their own articles and research papers. So this is finding a good journal. In fact, it's a skill. It's not that easy. And even similarly, there are so many issues. Checking the plagiarism, which is one of the manners of present times. Plagiarism is there, and then the grey literature in the market is there. There are so many issues in the publication sector that needs to be addressed. But one of the major concern is that the higher education publications, especially research publications, young researchers, they need to be given some hand holding. They need to be given some direction, some guidance about drafting or writing skill, writing a good paper and finding a good journal, and the steps to be followed in compliance to the format of the journal before submission. So therefore, the title of this webinar very tactfully and very nicely have been put together or kept selected as a think, check, and submit. With this, I welcome to all of our participants, delegates, those who have joined this webinar with a great deal of enthusiasm, and I'm expecting they will be getting good insights from our speakers. And we have very eloquent speakers with very diverse background, and they are the expert speakers. So they will be definitely enriching our experience in 1 hour session today. I extend you all a very warm welcome. And with this, I request Madam Dr. Pankaj Mittal, Madam, to kindly deliver her address and share her ideas and background about this program. Over to Madam Mittal, please.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Pani. Thank you very much. First of all, I must thank Caroline, who is the CEO of STM, for talking to us and putting it in front of us that this type of a seminar or webinar can be arranged, and finding a good resource person in the terms of Catherine. I mean, Catherine is a resource person from STM, and Atul Khosla is a resource person from AIU. So the purpose is to improve the research quality in India. As you all know that the National Education Policy 2020 has laid a lot of importance on research. It has also expressed its concern in terms of the spending on the research in India. You know that India is spending about 0.69% of the GDP on research, whereas this data for other countries is much, much larger. For example, USA it is 3.1. A country like Israel, it is 4.9% of GDP is spent on research. South Korea spends 4.6, UK spends 1.8, China spends 2.2. So in that, I mean, if you see the amount which we are spending upon research, we are very, very low, 0.69. If you talk of researchers per million population, that if you compare the researchers per million population, you will be amazed to know that countries like Denmark have 8,000 researchers per million population. Country like Finland has 6,800 researchers per million population. UK has 4,600. China is 1,300. India has 253. So the number of researchers per million population is 253 as compared to say 8,000 in Denmark. If you see the number of publications which we are publishing from India, of course, if we go from the ranking, it is at number 4 in the world. US is publishing about 0.8 million per year. China is publishing again about 0.78 million per year. UK is publishing 0.25 million and India is publishing about 0.1 million every year. So number-wise, it is number 4. But if you see the numbers as compared to, say, US and China, they are publishing 4 times as much as India is publishing, in spite of India being the second largest country of the world. But when you come to citations of these journals, we fall further low. And if the same countries, if we measure where we were number 4 in terms of number of research publications, we are at number 10 in terms of citations. Our average citation is only 3. Our H index is only 691 as compared to something like 1,600 in Great Britain, 1,100 in Australia, 1,300 in Canada, 2,500 in US. Our H index is 691. So all these figures, they made us think that we need to do something to improve the research quality of the publications which we have. We need to improve the number of publications we publish. Therefore, we thought that we should be directly hitting the target, that is the researchers, and tell them that how you can publish in a quality journal, how to even identify a quality journal, or I should say a predatory journal. Because in India, you know that University Grants Commission is the primary regulator of higher education. And it had made that research publication is important for getting promotions or career advancement in the career. And then it came to the knowledge of the UGC that just to gain promotion, people were publishing in predatory journals. So that was the reason that there was a list called UGC Care List, which came out to ensure that the students publish only in the good quality journals. But again, this is again a problem both for the faculty as well as the students to identify a good journal, to write a good research paper. So we thought we'll give them a step-by-step guide on how to write a good research paper. Then sometimes if you want to have if you have to write a grant proposal for getting a research grant, again, we feel that our faculty is deficient in how to write a impactful research project. So these series of webinars which we'll be doing today is the first webinar of the series. In these series of webinars, we'll be addressing all these issues, starting from how to write a research paper, how to identify a good journal, how to write a good research proposal for the grants, so and similar issues which concern the researchers. So all these will be discussed in these webinars, and we saw very good response. Something like 1,000 participants had registered. So far, 138 have joined. Maybe more will be coming very slowly. They are adding to the number. So thanks to Caroline, thanks to Catherine, thanks to Dr. Atul for being with us today, for taking up this responsibility. And thanks, Dr. Pani, for organizing all this. Thank you very much. Dr. Pani, you will take it forward. You are on mute.
Yes, ma'am. Yes. Thank you, ma'am, for giving us the background of this webinar. This is very much important, really, and it has a very, very seriousness, because publication sector today is facing through a very, very rough weather, and especially UGC has made such provisions for quality control of publications and avoiding plagiarism and for implementation of ethical practices. So many things has been done, but despite the fact there have been many manipulations and many new journals coming up, they are affecting the quality of the publications. So better we will listen to our the guest speakers, those who will be enriching our experience today. Our first speaker is Dr. One second.
Hey, Caroline will speak first.
Yeah, that's right. Dr. Caroline Sutton, I request the CEO of STM to kindly share her views on the series of the webinars we have planned and how we can benefit our audience, how we can reach it, our university faculty members by enriching their experience also. Dr. Caroline, may I request you to please come in?
Thank you very much, Dr. Pani, and thank you, Dr. Mittal. As you said, my name is Caroline, and I am the CEO for STM. STM is a membership organization for scholarly publishers, and our members are in 40 countries around the world currently, and we hope to be growing. And one of the things that we are very concerned about is that we recognize that there are, particularly when open access emerged, but there's always been some publishers who are not serious and who are taking advantage of researchers, recognizing that one of the ways in which researchers advance their careers is by publishing. Many years ago, this is 10 years ago now, I believe, maybe even more, a number of us came together and we were particularly concerned about this. We knew that there were researchers with very good research who had been fooled. We knew there were some not serious actors, and we said, we've got to create some type of campaign to help researchers understand how can we identify a good and serious journal. And one can create a blacklist and say, these are bad ones. But the problem with that is that if you are trying to fool people, you will come up with new ways to fool them tomorrow that we hadn't thought about today. And so the most important thing as a researcher is to understand what is a good journal. What should I look for to identify the good ones? And this is where things like the Directory of Open Access Journals has emerged for open access journals to list those that are doing a proper job, but also trade associations like STM, my own organization. Not everyone can join. We do look to ensure that those who are joining our organization are attending to proper practices, because publishers, serious publishers, want to take into account that we are truly accountable, that process from the moment you submit your paper, that everyone who is working on the peer review or the editorial board or acting as an editor is acting properly and according to ethical practices, as well as any staff that are working on that journal. We also work to ensure that any decisions about a paper being published are separate from the editorial decision about whether that paper is of the quality necessary to be published. And so I'm very pleased to, in a moment, be introducing you to our next speaker, because I happen to be in the room. I don't know if you'll know this, Catherine, but many, many years ago when we were discussing this, my good now friend, Deborah Kahn, said, we need a campaign. We need something simple that will make researchers stop and think about where they're publishing. And this was where the Think, Check, Submit campaign was born. And so I'm very pleased now to introduce to everyone on the call our next speaker, who is Catherine Stefan. And Catherine works at the John Moores University Library as a librarian and is involved with our Think, Check, Submit campaign. This is now a cooperation across many organizations in many countries. And we so appreciate the efforts of librarians such as Catherine in helping to spread the word. And so we're very pleased as well that the Association of Indian Universities was interested in providing this opportunity. So I thank Dr. Mittal and I thank Dr. Pani for offering this opportunity. And with that, I'd like to hand over to Catherine Sefan. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline, and thank you, Dr. Pani and Dr. Mittal, for inviting me here today. As Caroline said, my name is Catherine, and I am from Liverpool John Moores University. It's very snowy in Liverpool today, which is quite unusual. If I keep looking out the window, it's because I cannot believe that it's snowing in March and it's staying on the ground. My children will be very excited, but anyway, that's another story for another time. So let me just share my screen, and I think that this should work. Let's see, put this here. Okay, I'm unmuted now. I think that's okay. Can you see my screen? It can do, yeah. Okay, awesome. Right, so as I said, I am the librarian representative on Think, Check, Submit, and I'm one librarian, and we have publishers and other people that are interested in, as we said, helping people make sound publishing choices. And so this is my talk, choosing a home for your work, published work, Think, Check, Submit. And just, oops, if I can just, let's see, there we go. So just a little bit of background about myself. As I said, that is not what Liverpool looks right now because it's like white and snowy, but this is Liverpool where I am living. I'm from the United States, but I've been living in the UK and in Liverpool for quite some time. That's my office when I am on campus, although I'm home right now, and that's me. And I am a research engagement librarian. And so predominantly my job is to help support PhD students and researchers with finding information, publishing, and then also sharing their work with the wider world. I'm a big advocate for open research, and I run an open research week with colleagues in the Northwest each week, and we're actually doing that right now. I'll put a link, and actually I've put a link in the chat. I think if I can move my mouse here, here is a link to Think, Check, Submit if you'd like to have a look while I'm talking. But I am here representing Think, Check, Submit, but I still have that that librarian hat on. So I'm going to come, my talk is a lot about how I help researchers from that point of view. And Think, Check, Submit, as Caroline welcomed, the event is sort of talking about, it's to help you make decisions. And I think Dr. Pani summed it up well when he said, this isn't easy, but this should be part of you making publishing decisions, is thinking before you publish. Before you choose where you're going to go, you need to do a little bit of work. It isn't easy to do this necessarily, but it will get easier. And Think, Check, Submit can be a tool that can help you decide if this is going to be the right place for your work. And when we talk about predatory publishers, there are similar characteristics, although it doesn't necessarily mean that someone is predatory just because they do these things. But some of the things that you may have seen, there'll be misleading information. Their names might be very similar to publishers that you've heard of, or the titles might be really similar. And even experienced researchers can be taken in. And part of my job is helping those researchers. And we have had that on many different occasions. And this is newly starting out, early career researchers, and I have helped professors that have said, I don't know what's happened, but I've ended up submitting to these places. So we're not here to shame you or say that you're bad if you do this, because, as Caroline said, one day it might be one thing that they do, and then the next day they change what they're doing to try to trick you, into doing these sorts of things. And we kind of say, unfortunately, you can't trust everything, every email that you get, you can't trust that that's necessarily going to be a reputable publisher. They are set up to make money. And what they do is that they're going to be charging you to publish those articles, but without those proper checks that you're probably used to as a part of academic publishing. And similarly with book publishers, same sort of deal, that you'll be publishing and you'll be charged money, but you probably aren't going to have that peer review and that editing process that you've come, to expect, and you probably do yourselves as researchers. That won't be a part of those processes. It's really about getting the publications out very quickly and making money as they do so. And as this was alluded to at the, welcoming this talk, it's a problem for a lot of different reasons. Obviously, if the research is unchecked, there might be a credibility to that research that isn't there. It might be that people will build upon that research, but it's not actually sound. But also things that it undermines that trust that people may or may not have in published research. And we're all experiencing that right now. We've just gone through a global pandemic where people are mistrustful of some information, and unsound research can add to that problem. And for you as a researcher, it can also undermine your credibility as well, unwillingly, or if you are potentially publishing in one of these journals, it can be seen to harm you either now or in the future. If someone has seen that you've published there, it can be difficult to take away those things. And so it's about being careful. It doesn't mean it's not going to ruin your career, but it's just, it doesn't necessarily help it when people may associate you with a publication that is considered predatory. And so my talk is kind of in 5 different bits. The first thing we're going to talk about is, and this is what I do with my researchers, is we always say that there is a home for your work, that you have a choice when you publish. There is no list. That think, check, submit can be your checklist, and then a few final words of caution. So I'll go through each one of those. I always like to say to people that there is a home for your work. And I appreciate those of you here are going to have different pressures and different backgrounds and different routes into where you want to be in your academic career. And so you might be thinking, yeah, but I've got to publish here, I've got to publish here. But what I'd like you to sort of expand on is, instead of thinking about the best place to publish, thinking about the right place to publish. This is a screenshot of a colleague of mine at Edge Hill University, and these are all different examples of outputs that you might have as a researcher. And depending on what you're going to be doing, there's going to be a different home for that work. And you can see on that screen, it might be that you have a data set, you might have an exhibition, a report, you might have a writing publication, which is what we probably think of. But it's to kind of expand thinking about, right, where are these pieces going to potentially be published? And depending on what I'm writing, who are the people that are going to be wanting to read these sorts of things? And we really like to try to talk to our researchers about thinking less about, well, I have to publish here, and more about who is the readership of this publication? Who do I want to be able to learn from what I'm doing, and how can I share those sorts of things? And depending on what you're doing, it might be that it's in a trade publication. It might be that it's a blog post because it's going to reach a lot more people. And so depending on that, we always like to say that there's different homes. And it's also considering, when you're choosing, who and where do you read, and thinking about where do those people publish, but also who are your colleagues and the people that you admire? Where are they publishing? What are you reading from the people that are at the cutting edge of what they do? And thinking about, right, those are the sorts of places that I want to aspire to. But it can also help you think that that might be a good home for your work, because you know that it's a place where people within your community are also publishing. I also like to say to people, and again, I understand that there's pressures within academia and research culture, so I don't want to say that those things don't exist, but that authors have a choice. And thinking about that before you even decide to put, type pen to, I want to say pen to paper, but I'm imagining that most people probably are typing. But thinking about those choices before you even start writing, and thinking, where do I want to do this? Now, I'm taking it from the perspective of where I am in Liverpool, and there might be other tools that you might use. Caroline mentioned the Directory of Open Access Journals. This is a fantastic resource that is open to anyone to use. They've got fantastic filters. They just announced that they have a filter where authors can filter by that you get to retain your copyright. So that's another awesome tool. But things like DOAJ, in the UK, we often use something called Sherpa Romeo, and that lists different titles, and it will tell you about how long embargo periods will be. And then depending on the sort of subscriptions that you have, for myself and for the people that I help, a lot of times it's things like Scopus and Web of Science. And what I like to say to people is, these are not comprehensive. Not every title is in here. But if I don't see the title of a place that I'm thinking about publishing in any of these spaces, I start to wonder, okay, where is this published work coming from? Who is the publisher? Where is the journal? There's also lots of journal finders from publishers that can help you kind of think about where potentially you might want to put your work. But it's also things about, what can you afford? And I don't mean that just in terms of cost. You have to think about it with your time. So it might be, can I afford in my schedule to write up a 6,000 word paper? Or is this piece of work going to be better in a blog post, for example, like for the conversation, or for within your school or whatnot? You don't necessarily need to pay to make your work open access. There are lots and lots of journals that you can find via the directory of open access journals. You can filter and say, no article processing charges. And there's also lots of journals that are open and that you are able to publish open access without paying a charge. Again, it's about thinking about that before you are, even writing anything. Where are potential homes for my work? And the last thing that I always say to researchers that I work with is, who is going to be able to read this work if I publish here? And you need to think about, can your audience actually read this? If your work is behind a paywall, or if your institution doesn't have a subscription to that particular journal, it might even be that your colleagues sitting next to you can't read that work. So thinking about where are the places that you can potentially publish, but then will the people that I want to read be able to read that? And again, this isn't going to tell you that something is bad or good, but for me, it all fits into that process of thinking about where you're going to publish before you publish at all. And the third thing, and I think Caroline brought this up, is I always say, and I know that I'm nervous when I come to do these talks because I know people want a list. Like, everyone wants a list. And I'm really sorry to tell you that there isn't one list that you can check. I get asked for lists. I've had 2 emails this week asking me for a list. And unfortunately, there isn't ever going to be a list that can tell you for sure, this is good for you, this isn't good for you, this is a bad journal, this is a good journal. Recently, there's been a few things that I noticed. This was a couple of weeks ago. Someone published an article in Scientific Reports suggesting that perhaps there might be AI could potentially help us determine if something was a predatory journal by using some of the metadata within the journal itself. Maybe it could help us narrow it down. There's also paid services. So Cabels is a paid service that will get you different lists. And the reason why I say that there isn't a list, and it's mostly just because, as Caroline said, it might be up to date today, and then at the end of the afternoon, it might not necessarily be up to date in terms of what you see. And that's why we try to teach people to be proactive in their publishing choices. The other issue that I have with lists is thinking about who curates them and who decides what's not on or what is on. A lot of the lists that do exist are heavily biased towards what we call the global north, and they don't include a lot of journals that might potentially be located in other countries. And then also, they don't necessarily always include open journals that don't have a cost. What happens if you can't pay for these services? Is it okay for you to publish in places that aren't good? And also, who curates these lists? Who decides? And I always feel uncomfortable when it's a group of people deciding that this is good and this is bad, because unless you can get rid of all that bias, there's still issues within that. So what we like to say, is that Think, Check, Submit can help you with that. We can't be a list, but we can be your checklist, and that will be my next screen. But as Caroline said, this is how it came about. Was the first response was to have block lists or unsafe journals or allowed lists, and there's been lots of different variants of that. But having a list doesn't really build up researchers' skills to identify things. It makes you feel safe and it's easier, but you don't know for sure. And it doesn't allow you to build up that intelligence to learn, right, I know that that isn't going to be right for me because of these things. And lists also, as we say, they might not be 100% reliable, although I know why people want them because they are so much easier. And as I said, this is what we say, is that think, check, submit can be your checklist. And I'm just going to go a few of the things that are on the webpage, which I put into the chat. And just to say, this has been translated in loads of different languages. It's run mostly by volunteers. We volunteer our time to be a part of it. And just to say, if you notice that there aren't any languages that aren't on there that should be on there, please get in touch because we would love to have more translations on there. So the first thing that we say is think about that. Just be aware that there are people that are trying to make money from you and are trying to undermine the system. That awareness alone is going to help you make sound publishing decisions. But within that, thinking, do you or your colleagues know this journal? If you've never heard of a journal and they're reaching out to you, dig a little bit deeper. Have you read any articles in there? Is it easy to discover those journal articles? Is the name very, very similar to another title, but not quite the same? Are you able to cross-check that information on the ISSN portal, which I can put into the chat later? And things like, are you able to contact the publisher? Can you tell where they're located? Do they have an email? Do they have any kind of social media presence? But also things like, are they clear about the peer review that they use? Do they talk about how many reviewers that they have? Is there an editorial board? If you Google someone on the editorial board, is it actually a real person? Do they mention it on their university website that they are an editor or a reviewer for this person, for this journal? Do they have a very short peer review time period? That's not to say that that's predatory, but given that there are difficulties within the peer review world to get things out really quickly, it does start to make you wonder, how are they doing this so quickly? Is someone actually reading it? Also things like, is it indexed anywhere? So are you able to find it in any other database? Do they even have an index on their own web pages? And like, does it have digital identifiers like a DOI? Can you share it in other ways and find it? Is it something that's a permanent link to that particular publication? And the other thing that I'm always saying to researchers at my institution, we don't have an open access fund to pay for things. Is the journal clear about the sorts of fees that you're going to have to pay? Does it explain what the fees are for? And does it outline what kind of currency it might be in, or if there's additional charges for page length or color charges? Does it explain about waivers and what you'd need to do? And then other things about, are there any guidelines for authors? So does it talk about the license policy, if you can retain your copyright? Does it have anything about conflict of interest? So does it mention those sorts of things? Are you able to download the paper in ways other than just reading it on the web page? And then another one that does come up a lot is, does it have metrics about the journal, and do those metrics check out? So sometimes they'll create metrics that are very similar to, like, say, for example, journal impact factor, but they call it something slightly different. And if you follow through on it, it doesn't actually go to anything. So, just things to sort of consider as you go through. And then also things like, is it a member of a recognizable industry initiative? So as Caroline mentioned with STM, or with things like COPE, is it listed on DOAJ? And then also other journal indexing sites that are sort of globally specific in different parts of the world. Can you find it anywhere else? If you can say yes to most of these, then you can consider that this might be a publication that you might want to publish in. I always add in the extra bit of, if the things on the top check out. So I can see that they have archived articles. I can see that the editors are listed. I know how much it's going to cost. The thing I would always encourage researchers to do next too is, you've got to check the aims and scope, and you've got to check the author guidelines. If this publication is not writing about the area of research that you are writing about, it's probably not the right home for you. You need to check things like, How long of, do they take articles over 5,000 words? Do they take case studies? Because you might be writing a case study and this publication doesn't take case studies. So again, that's not going to prevent you from being a predatory publisher, but it's about thinking, right, I need to know this before I decide to submit an article someplace. Now I've added in a couple of just quick cautions because I know I'm coming to the end here. I've got five quick cautions, or I think it's 4 actually, but no, 0.5, so I've got 4 cautions. This is what I've been seeing a lot in my job as a research engagement librarian. We get people coming to us saying the guest edit pitch, and these are from publishers that are not considered predatory, but I would still advise people to be cautious. This is where they come to you and they say, we love your work, we love what you're doing, we want you to guest edit an issue, you need to find all of the papers, and you also need to pay for all the papers within. You might have that kind of money available, but just be wary because, do they want you for your content or do they want you for your money? Again, consider what the cost is to you. Do you have the time to guest edit an entire issue and find all of this? I always just say to the people I work with, just be cautious because it might be that might not be the right home for your work if you're having to pay lots and lots of money to publish there. The other caution I have is what I call the bait and switch. And this is where you submit your work to a particular journal, it's not accepted, and the publisher suggests another publication that they have, which costs money. They don't tell you that it costs money until after you've decided that you will publish there because they've said, we love your work, you can publish here instead. So just be cautious because this does happen. A third thing that's happened a lot, and maybe I'm just cynical because I work in the library, the ask the library and they can pay, which is where you will say, I can't publish there because I don't have any money. And then the publisher says, well, ask the library, they can pay for it. And I would always say, before you make any decisions about money, if you don't hold the money, just make sure you ask the person that does have the money because that can become, there can be problems down the line. And then the fourth thing is we used to do this for free and now you need to pay for us to do this. A few things that we've had happen in the UK recently is where people in the past, publishers would put their author accepted manuscript into places like PubMed Central, and they used to do that just as a matter of they would do that. And now some publishers are saying that we will only do this if you are paying us to do that for you. So just be aware that know what you're getting involved in anytime that you're choosing somewhere to publish, whether that's a charge or what you've agreed to do with your time. Again, just a few little cautions I was thinking of that I probably have these things happen each week. So just to sort of summarize here, if you've never heard of a journal and you're thinking, should I publish here? If you're thinking to yourself, where is the best place to publish? And if you want to know if something is predatory or problematic, think, check, and then submit. And the final 5 points are, there is a home for your work. You have a choice where you publish. There is no list. Think, check, submit can be your checklist. And then those final words of caution. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Catherine. That was excellent. And I believe our next speaker will be introduced by, was that Dr. Mittal or Dr. Pani?
Okay, so I'll do that. So our next speaker is Professor Atul Khosla. He is the Vice Chancellor of Shulini University, which is in Himachal Pradesh in Solan. And it's a very good research university, a research university, which is figuring on the international map. And I hope that once you listen to him, you will know that why Shulini is on the international map with regard to the research. So over to Professor Atul Khosla, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mittal. I hope I'm audible. I'm sorry I was having trouble in and out getting in, and I hope my next 30 minutes will be seamless. Thank you, Catherine, for such a, I would say, enlightening discussion and enlightening presentation. Unfortunately, I'm not able to share my presentation. I'll request someone from STM to do that, please. If you can,
Yes, I will pull that up right now for you. Thank you very
I
much for
will.
letting me know you were having issues. Just give me one moment.
So, as Caroline is pulling this up, I'll do a quick introduction to Shulini. We are located in the mountains in India, and the starting point of Shulini was always research. We believe that a great university needs to have a great research platform, and that's what we've been working on over the last 13, 14 years as a university. So what I'll be talking about today will be uh, a, a quick introduction to Shulini, but more importantly, I'll take you through about how did we do it. We're not a very large university, we're a private university. So how did Shulini go about building its research platform? And then I'll give you a little bit of tips around the way I work with my researchers at Shulini in making sure that there's quality of research coming down. So the topic of my discussion today is going to be building a research culture. And Caroline, you might want to just bring up the slideshow. There's a box at the bottom.
Oh, I will try that. I'm just slightly worried that you'll get there we go. How's that?
Lovely, that sounds good. So that's a picture from my bedroom, and it's a beautiful campus we have. I'll request you to move to the next exhibit, Caroline. Sorry, I'm going to make you sweat a bit. Apologies for that. The topics I'm going to cover today, like I said, will be a quick introduction to Shulini about our work in research. Just as an introduction, I'd like to introduce the way I see research, this research value chain, and why we believe Think, Check, Submit is very important. Just in continuation to the previous speaker, I'll talk a bit about building a great research culture. How can you contribute as researchers? And finally, your journey towards a great publication. So quickly about Shulini, if I go to the next exhibit, we are a young university, we are a research-centric university, but we have high ambitions. Our stated vision is to be a top 200 global university, and I'll again request Caroline for you to move to the next one. We are young, we are founded by academicians, not very large, but multidisciplinary. And the way we think about research is not just about science, but about research everywhere, whether it's in hard subjects like biotechnology or in as soft subjects as liberal arts and yoga, where we are also doing sizable publications. We are fully accredited, which is expected of any university. What I'd like to show with you how our research publications have grown over the years. And Caroline, could you move to the next one, please? And you'll see a very steep increase in research publications. We are around 200 odd full-time faculty members. And last year we published around 829. These are all Scopus Index research papers. And you'll see a very steady growth. This has been part of what I call building a research culture inside the university. At an average, every faculty is publishing high quality 3 to 4 publications, and we encourage our faculty to publish in Scopus or Web of Sciences or any other high quality peer-reviewed journal. What we also try to do is benchmark the quality of research that we do. And next one, please. And there are 7 parameters which we think are very critical in terms of any researcher or any institution, how you benchmark research. The first is field-weighted citation impact, which is Scopus terminology. It indicates how good or bad you are vis-a-vis the world. One is the world's average. The second is citations, of course. How much citations are you getting compared per publication? Are you publishing in top 10%, 1% top quartile journals? And finally, how much are you collaborating in terms of internationally in producing your research publications? So I'd just like to mention over here that when you compare Shulini today with some of the best universities of the world, and this is the top 10 THE universities, you'll see pretty much in every parameter, Shulini research is comparable with pretty much the world's best. And I'm, of course, talking about research publications over here. how do we do it? And let me try to demystify this over the next 10 minutes. Next.
Dr. Khosla, be a bit louder. Your voice is fading away in between. So please be a bit louder.
I apologize. I'll come a little closer to the screen. So before I go into how Shalini does it, I'll just like to mention that specifically in certain rankings, whether it's QS or THE, Shalini is right up there on research publications. In THE, we are 39th globally, and in QS, we are #1 in India in citations per paper. So what I'll do in the next 15 minutes, and do let me know, Dr. Mittal, if I'm audible or not. I'd like to demystify how do we do it and how did Shalini go about building its research profile. So the first thought which I'd like to leave with all of you is the research value chain and why we believe Think, Check, Submit becomes very, very important. If you look at the value chain, the way we look at it is a 6-step process. The first is identifying the problem, which also is a very important part of your research journey. Are you choosing a problem as you think about the next 2 or 3 years, which is relevant to the world? A small example would be, typically if you're working on SDGs, if you're working on Sustainable Development Goals, you'll see a way more effective publication coming out. You'll see way more grants coming out of that. And you'll also see way more collaboration, citations coming out of work, which is more relevant. You'll develop your hypothesis based on the problem that you've identified, which all of you do. You'll design the experiment. Hopefully, you'll spend some time on that, designing the analysis and the experiment. The fourth part is conducting the experiment. And I think this is where a lot of collaboration can come in. One statistic I'd like to leave over here is that around 85% of research equipment in the world is actually lying idle. If you reach out to the right collaborators, you can actually come up with great experiments happening with collaborators, even if you don't have those equipments. Of course, then you'll analyze the data and finally publish. This is where I think the most critical part of the discussion comes in, because despite if you're not publishing properly, if you're not publishing in the right journals, all the effort that you've made in the last 2-3 years in terms of this whole value chain can actually get hampered. So I've specifically mentioned publish over here. Give focus on publishing, finding the right journal, which Catherine sort of spoke about. Over the next 3 to 4 exhibits, I'll talk about how do we as an institution talk about building a research culture, and I'll request for the next exhibit over here. So this is a lot about how you as researchers need to look at it, and how we as management need to look at it. I think the first thing is, which is relevant for both you as a researcher and us as university management, is to identify a research strategy. What will be your work? Why will it be relevant for anyone over the next 3 to 5 years? You need a research office. Even as a researcher, as you think about doctoral students that you have, or as management, you need a research office. You need to ensure that research is tracked. You need to ensure that the goals are aligned with faculty and students. So if you're a researcher with multiple doctoral students, you need to make sure that there is a resource that's tracking your research. Are you providing the appropriate research infrastructure as management to your researchers? Are you providing autonomy to them? Are you providing the right subscriptions to journals, whether it's Scopus or Web of Sciences or others? Again, becomes very, very important. I'd like to mention that many times your university or your institution might not have some of these resources, whether it's Scopus or Scibel or Web of Science and others, but do not be disheartened. I think if you can walk into any large public university, pretty much you can get access to it. I do encourage my researchers at Shalini to do that. We leverage Punjab University's resources very effectively. It's around 2 hours from where we are, and our researchers do that all the time. So just because your university doesn't have Scopus access or a Web of Science access or an EBSCO access, doesn't mean that you cannot go about reviewing journals that you'd like to. Please, could you go to the next one, please? The fourth thing I'll talk about is establishing research groups and centers. The best research happens when there is transdisciplinary research. It's something that, again, we have been very successful in doing, and I'll give a couple of examples over here. Let's assume that you're a biotechnology scientist working on cancer research and you've done some phenomenal work. If you can extend that first to the economics of that research, and then you can then extend that to, let's say, the social impact of that research, you can expect a way more superior publication. You can expect way better citations, and the impact of that will be way superior. So can you create research groups amongst yourselves first inside your university, and then of course outside the university as you go ahead? Of course you need seed funding for it. Of course you need support from the institution. So we do a lot of from our perspective, we recognize our researchers, we make sure that we share successes, we party on success. Every time there's a great publication that happens, everyone would write that on email, and that's how we'll sort of go about and sharing each other's successes. Sometimes, actually most of the times, you'll typically see you rely on your PhD students or your doctoral students research. One of the things that Shulani has been able to do very effectively is to take research right up to the undergraduate curriculum level. So we've seen that undergraduates can actually provide phenomenal legs and arms towards providing great research. That's another area that you might want to look at. It also helps interdisciplinary research programs. It encourages collaboration between faculties and students, and finally you end up producing quality research publications. Next, please. The seventh thought would be, I spoke about undergraduate research opportunities, something we will truly encourage. Intellectual property rights. My experience when I came to Shulani was many researchers would limit to publications and not extend that to patents. Again, start thinking about patents, start thinking about extending your research to filing patents. If you are an institution, build an IPR cell, assist your fellow scientists in filing patents, and make sure that you're also cross-citing your patents and publications as and when appropriate. You need to commercialize. You need to make sure that you create entrepreneurs. Some of you might want to do that. So take your ideas, start experimenting with people in the industry, which also becomes very important. Another thing which we've been able to do very effectively is work with scientists from the industry who are also very keen to publish along with you. Can actually go a long way in creating relevant research. Next, please. Number 10, the partnerships and collaborations. Within the university or institution and outside, internationally, you can get lots of funding opportunities when you do that. Please do not underestimate the value of collaboration. In fact, if there is one thing I'd like to leave over here with all of you is the power of collaboration. And my experience is that faculty to faculty collaboration is way more superior than university to university or institution to institution collaboration. So just because, for example, we actually might not have a collaboration with Liverpool, just as an example, doesn't mean that me and Catherine can't collaborate. And that's really where the rubber hits the road, when faculty to faculty collaboration happens. Taking your research to the community is a big area and topic in India. Work around that, work with local organizations. If you have a social sciences faculty, work with them, taking your research out there. And finally, on point number 2 is the quality of research. Where are you publishing? I think Catherine touched on it, but one of the things that we encourage our doctoral students and researchers is do not sacrifice on the quality of the research journal. Focus on high impact research journals. Make sure that you keep away from predatory journals. I'll talk about that a bit. And also, I'll keep talking about interdisciplinary research. So that's again an area that we need to keep on talking about. Next, please. Am I there? I can't. Could you please move to the next exhibit, please? Okay,
We
wonderful.
are on number 13 is
How
showing
do
now.
you communicate your research findings? I can I can see it now. Am I audible, please?
Yes,
Hello?
you are now. Yes, you are. You were breaking out a bit, but you're there now. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Is it really bad? Am I breaking a lot?
Yes, yes, it is the case that you are breaking and coming in and out.
But now you continue. I think it is okay now.
Let me continue. I guess sorry for this. I'm outside and I've tried hard to get a right a link. I'm really sorry for this. So my 13th point was to take a research to the wider community, for institutions, ensuring that there's a research ethics committee, ensuring that your research goes through wiser people in the university. Research publication, for example, that we ensure that there is zero tolerance for plagiarism. Again, that's something for senior scientists and researchers to look into. Monitoring the research ecosystem, evaluating the impact, and finally, I think the last one, which I'd like to talk about, which is the next exhibit. If you can move to the next exhibit, is grants. You cannot do quality research without grants. So please focus on grants, writing research grants. It's something which I learned years of experience in consulting where I built my career. The typical ratio of getting a grant is
Dr.
6
Khosla, you
to
please
1.
switch off your video.
And I
Maybe
tell
then
my
your audio will
researchers
be
that
better.
if you do research proposals,
Dr. Khosla.
expecting to get one large grant will not happen. Please make sure that when you're writing research grants is not one. I have switched it off. Okay, the last thought which I wanted to leave about the research culture was working on grants. So what's a good research publication? The way we define actually is 4 things. It should be novel, testing the right hypothesis. It should be describing your work, your hypothesis, and finally it needs to have the right social impact. So if these 4 criteria are met, you'll typically see acceptance of a publication of your research paper in a good journal and ensuring high impact. Let's go to the next. We'll see if I can get this right. So your journey towards a quality
I believe that we've lost Dr. Khosla right now.
Dr. Khosla, have we lost? I mean, is your connection there?
It would seem so, unfortunately.
He is in the list of panelists who are on board, but he is not heard.
And it does look like he's talking, but I don't believe we are hearing him.
Yes.
Though I think what is excellent here is that he has prepared excellent slides that have given some good information about developing a quality publication here. And Dr. Khosla, we're just checking to see if you're there. Perhaps you might just check.
Let me call him.
Okay, sure. And while you're doing that, I really appreciate this slide that he has prepared, because I think it is true that as you're preparing your paper, thinking about what type of paper is this? Is this a paper that is describing a methodology that I've developed? Is this a review paper? Review papers tend to get very highly cited. Is this original research? Is this a paper that's discussing someone else's work? And think about that before you submit that work. And Catherine, of course, talked about how to choose a good journal. And I see that some of the points that she raised are being repeated here. So looking for indexing in known and serious indexes is helpful. Looking to see whether that journal describes its peer review system and is that rigorous? Is there an impact factor? Impact doesn't necessarily mean quality, but often those journals have been reviewed by Web of Science very closely before being included in that. And looking at the publication frequency. If it hasn't published for a full year, that's probably not a very serious journal. And then finally, he's also talking here about misconduct during publication. And this is something that we as a trade association have been looking at quite a bit. And we are looking to ensure that one does not engage in this knowingly or unknowingly. So you want to ensure that in that journal that you don't see that there's been results that have been fabricated, which is not always easy. Taking a look and ensuring that there isn't a conflict of interest among collaborators. So if you receive a paper to peer review, for example, and you know that this is someone you work very closely with, you won't be as objective as you would be if it was someone that you did not know. And also thinking about plagiarism and even self-plagiarism or improper citation. So we want to avoid just citing people to cite them, but that those citations that you are making in a paper really need to be correct and appropriate. I'm just going to. There you are.
Caroline.
Yes. Would you like to say anything on that?
Hello?
I hope I was. Yes. Hello. We can hear you again. Please go ahead. I have your slide on your journey towards a quality publication.
Let me I'll come in again. I'll drop off this. Apologies. I can't hear anything. Could someone tell me if I'm audible? Just
yes, we can hear you again. We can hear you again.
So I can continue.
We can hear you again. And the slide that is on the screen is
wonderful. So I'll talk a bit about.
Go ahead.
अतुल जी अपना वीडियो ऑफ करके फिर बोलिए, मुझे लगता है बेटर रहेगा.
Unfortunately, it seems as if we may have lost Professor Khosla again.
Yes, he's not there.
Yeah, and this is unfortunate because I think his next slide here was about ethical concerns during the publication process, which I believe he's quite right in addressing. We've talked quite a bit on this webinar, which was the focus about predatory publishers. That is those publishers that are not serious and are not adhering to proper conduct and ethical conduct that we as serious publishers have defined as standards. We've also talked a bit about the different types of predatory publishers and some of those characteristics there, that the fees are hidden or unclear, that there is very often a guarantee that your paper will be accepted. A serious publisher will never guarantee you in advance that your paper will be published. It must be submitted to proper and serious peer review. Most publishers provide language editing or some form of language editing and will ensure that the language looks clear. So some occasional journals, you'll read those and see that the language is very poor. That doesn't necessarily mean it's a predatory journal, but it might be a reason to look for other indications that this is serious or not serious. And equally, there may be very low production quality as one of those characteristics. As he also notes here, there could be incomplete or misleading reporting. So that might be that the policies are not clear. A serious journal will always let you know what type of copyright or license that the work is being published under. There'll be lists about the individuals, the personnel that are working with this publishing company and working on that journal. And the affiliations will be listed on the website. So I know Catherine mentioned this, saying that look to the editorial board. Are these individuals you recognize? And can you actually find them? Is their full name and their affiliation there? And I think we have Professor Khosla trying to come back again. It's a bit choppy.
I am so sorry, Caroline. I don't know what's happening today. It's Murphy's Law. I hope I'm audible now.
And I hope by having your slides, I've been trying to channel what your thinking might have been on these. You have excellent slides that have helped us to continue the conversation here. Are you still there? Because you also have some information which I have not presented yet on post-publication process.
Ethical concerns, Dr. Khosla, you would like to mention anything about the ethical concerns in the previous slide?
Yes.
Absolutely. I think it's very important for researchers to, I think the three things which I'd like to mention. First, there is a lot of pressure from management nowadays to publish. So I think that's for you to ensure that you're not succumbing to that pressure. I think that's one. The second is, as you're choosing the right journal, and I think Caroline did a great job explaining about it, you have to ensure that you do not get caught in predatory journals. Typically, our rule of the thumb is that if it's a journal which is above 1.5 impact factor, that's typically a good journal. Typically, low impact factor journals you'll see are more predatory in nature. Normally, researchers would think that it's difficult to publish in a high-impact journal. Actually, it's a myth that needs to be broken. You need to understand the language and how you publish on the requirements of that particular publication, the way you would write the abstract, the way you would write the research paper. So I would say, I would encourage all of you to sort of take out some best practice research papers from the journal that you've identified, go through that, and then ensure that you've written that publication in that particular format, ensure that your language is up to the mark. Grammarly is a great tool. There's no plagiarism in there. So I think these are the few tips which I'd like to give to the researchers over here. But the most critical thing is to ensure that in your mind, you believe that your research publication is of high quality and it can be published in the best research journals that you've chosen as the best. And of course, be aware of predatory stuff. And I think Catherine spoke a lot about it. So there's a question which says, Monica says, what happens if a journal doesn't reply to you? I think, again, this happens all the time. Try a couple of times, Monica, but in case it doesn't reply to you, you need to move to the next journal. So post-publication process is also very, very important. You need to ensure that your research, your publication is shared in platforms, ensure that you're participating in conferences, ensure that you are you're sharing your links on platforms like Twitter and LinkedIn. Incidentally, LinkedIn has become very, very popular nowadays. You've seen lots of researchers are actually on LinkedIn nowadays. Citations are critical for you. Avoid self-citations to the extent that you can. Some of it is fine. Again, as a rule of the thumb, I believe 10 to 15% self-citations are okay, but anything beyond that is, of course, not optimal. Strategies that you could use as an institution or as a researcher, things that we do. We typically, when we benchmark faculty, when you look at faculty, or when you look at your own performance, we think FWCI above 2 is great, but upwards of 1 is actually very important. So look at Civil data. Make sure that you look at your bank account every day. The Civil is like your bank account, your citations that you have, the field weighted citation impact that you have, the H index that you have. So track that on a regular basis. Sometimes I've also seen that the addresses are wrong, Dr. Mittal. So you might have multiple names on Scopus, for example. Your name might have changed post marriage, or you might have a Singh there, and you might have multiple affiliations. So make sure that that's sanitized. Otherwise, your whole publication data might also get frittered away. Of course, zero tolerance for plagiarism. This is especially when you have doctoral students writing publications. Please, please, please make sure that you're using appropriate plagiarism tools to ensure that there's no plagiarism. And I'll just leave my last quote over here saying that, look, while you will have lots of pressure on publications from your professors, from your management, etc., remember that great research can be addictive. It is great for both you and for the organization. So you're not just doing it for the organization, for also for yourself. Build your profile, track your profile, and I hope that out of these 165 researchers over here today, there'll be some great scientists emerging in the near future. Once again, I apologize for all the low bandwidth and the gaps that happened in my presentation. But hopefully, I can get into a Q&A and answer any questions that are there. Thank you very much. That is from me. This is a few glimpses of Shalini.
Beautiful images. I need to put those up for a moment. Thank you very much. And I think with that, we've got some questions that have come in, haven't we?
Yes, we have. So, Catherine, are you there?
If I might ask panelists to please turn their cameras back on. Thank you. Welcome back, Catherine.
Yes.
And I hope that we still have Professor Kushla there. So one of the questions that we have here is, can we submit our paper in this type of journal showing MetSit journal, Scopus coverage years from 2014 to 2022? Is that a specific journal, or is that a known index in India? I'm not familiar with that, I have to say. I don't know if any of our other panelists are.
I didn't get the question, Caroline.
It said, can we submit our paper to the journal showing MetSit journal, METSZET? This might be a very specific title, and they're wondering, perhaps the person asking the question is wondering if this is a journal they can submit to.
I am not aware of this, but I can get back to this gentleman. If you can write to me, I'll leave my email with you. I can get back, but I am not particularly sure about this this particular terminology right now. So I'll just leave my email over here, and we'll be very happy to get back.
And I think one point to make there, because this individual also writes that there was Scopus coverage from years 2014 to 2022. And if Scopus is saying that that journal is covered, then that would be correct. And that would be a sign of a serious journal. If the journal is claiming that they're covered, I would always go and check that in the actual database. We've also seen on some of these not serious journals that they say they have an unofficial impact factor or an unofficial something, and that means that they're sort of creating something themselves. And so I would say that that is one thing to go and look at. We've also
and
go ahead.
We've seen that Scopus also keeps pushing some low impact or predatory journals out of Scopus. So it's a dynamic platform, both Web of Sciences and Scopus. So you just need to be sure that at that particular point of time, the journal is indexed in Scopus.
Correct. And that's very true with all of these indexes, that they are constantly reviewing the content in them. And I see that some of our questions have received a direct response. So I want to thank folks for doing that. We also have someone asking, how can you check the journal publishing and acceptance speed after communicating to a particular journal? And this, I think the question here is about how quickly journals will, from the time you submit your paper to the time you can expect a decision. So many journals will write on the web page how much time you can expect, what the average is from the time you submit a paper to the time it is accepted. Now, in some cases, it can take some time, and that might be if you're writing in an area of research that is quite new, where perhaps there aren't very many researchers yet globally that are working in that area. And it might take some time for a serious journal to find reviewers to review that paper. And so sometimes that can feel very, very frustrating. You can always write to a journal, and a serious journal should respond to you to provide some information about where your submission is in that process. I don't know if any of our other panelists have any comments about that time from submission to acceptance.
I mean, I've seen things getting published within 1 month, Caroline, and it could take up to 2 years. It also depends upon the quality of your writing. So many times it can go through multiple editions. So I don't think there's any specific rule over here, but I would assume anything beyond 3 to 4 months would be something that you need to be about. That's the way I would look at it.
And just to say, it can vary by subject area, so some subject areas it can take a lot longer, and it feels like it's always been a problem, the length of time, but it feels like lately there's been a lot more people talking about how long things are taking, and some of that, because you all are potentially reviewers, and there's been a bit of a pushback from the academy to sort of say, do I have time for this kind of stuff. So I don't think there's any hard and fast rule, but like Caroline said, some publishers put those things on there. I always am slightly dubious as to if that is the actual time that it takes, or if that's what they say so that more people, will say, oh, that takes too long, or that's pretty fast. So, and I do think, as Dr. Kolsa said, that like, you can always follow that up if it's taking too long, to check with those editors and see, so don't be afraid to reach out to people. And as Caroline also said, sometimes it is that your topic is quite niche and it just takes time to find people to review it and in the way that you'd want it to be reviewed.
Thank you, Catherine. And I would just add one last thing, which is, if you have submitted your paper and you feel like it's taking too long and you think, oh, I'd rather submit it somewhere else, before you do that, you need to retract your submission from the original journal where you submitted to. If you submit to yet another journal, this is, you've signed an agreement saying that you won't do that. And so you will have broken that agreement. But equally, you're now creating more work for more peer reviewers. So for yourselves, because now you've got 2 publishers that are looking for peer reviewers. So I would also caution, think carefully about that. So thank you for that input. Someone also had a question here. Dr. Menon came with a very good question about, if I'm preparing some research from Kerala, and perhaps it's a study that's very focused within a local hospital with a case mix or a disease pattern that's specific to a region, what do you think the chances are of that research being published in an international journal versus an Indian journal? And I wonder if our colleagues here who are researchers themselves might have some thoughts about that.
Professor Khosla?
Yeah, I don't think you should, because it's a Kerala related disease. What I would like to mention over here is that your chances of getting published in an international journal can exponentially increase if your research is collaborative. It's collaboration with an international resource, another international university. So every time you want to publish in an international journal, remember that collaboration will increase your citations, will increase the chances of being published in a high quality journal. So it's difficult to comment about a particular topic. I think you need to test it out. Rule of thumb, collaboration helps, especially international collaboration. It helps in every possible tip I have for you. Again, don't be afraid, just check it out. Go and many times what we've seen, Dr. Mittal, is researchers initially are very hesitant sending their papers out to quality journals. They've started believing that they want to publish, and many go and test it out. You'll get some great feedback. If it's a great journal, the editors will get in touch with you. You'll hone your writing skills. You even that particular publication might get refined and get better, even if it doesn't get accepted towards the end. So just make sure that you're not compromising on the quality of the journal that you're reaching out to. Over to you, Caroline.
Okay.
Thank
And
you.
also, Professor Khosla, thank you very much for that reply. Many times the researchers come to us and then they say that many, especially the online journals, they claim that I have a particular impact factor. We are a high impact factor journal. So they indicate even the value of impact factor, whatever number they indicate. So how to judge whether whatever they are claiming is right or wrong? So how do we cross-check? From where do they cross-check the impact factor of a journal?
There one can look at Web of Science to see. I believe that they will list which journals are listed, even if one cannot download reports about them. So one can check those databases.
But for the journals which are not included in Web of Science or Scopus, for those journals, how to check whether the claimed impact factor is right or not?
Well, the impact factor is an official calculation. It's actually the work of Web of Science. So only Web of Science can claim an impact factor. So if someone is claiming an impact factor and they're not in Web of Science, it's really some other number that they're looking at. The impact factor is calculated by taking the number of publications and, no, apologies, taking the number of total citations and then dividing that. So one could do that by hand to see how much is this journal being cited. It could be quite a feat, however, if that journal is publishing quite a bit, and to find all of those citations. Scopus as well creates not what is called an official impact factor, but also a calculation that is quite similar to the impact factor. But those are the two primary and official measures of impact currently. So I would be wary if someone is claiming that they have an impact factor. I would certainly write and ask them, how have you calculated this? Other things look correct about it. And I think because we're at a time as well where there are Go ahead, please. Go ahead, please, Dr. Costa.
I would like to mention two things over here, and I think you mentioned it right, Caroline. Impact factor is for Web of Sciences, and Scopus has a terminology called site score. So again, the calculations might be a little different. So you'll typically have journals with site score and impact. So that's, I think, one point. We, Dr. Mittal, encourage our researchers only to publish either in Scopus or Web of Sciences. And typically you'll see Scopus has a larger number of journals with them than Web of Sciences. But if you move up to high site score or high impact factor, then there'll be a very similar commonality between the two. High impact journals will typically be in both Scopus and Web of Sciences.
Why I was asking was because in like suppose UGC care list. I'm saying, like, for example, in UGC care list, of course, the UGC care list has Web of Science and Scopus, but plus something more. Some more journals are also there. So how to check the veracity of those journals in terms of the impact factor they are claiming?
At least at Shulini, Pankaj ma'am, the rule of the thumb we have is we encourage our faculty only to publish in Scopus or Web of Science. Otherwise, it's very, there is a Indian index also, but I'm not sure how credible that is. There's an Indian citation index also. So we tried from our perspective, from our university's perspective, we tried to limit it to Scopus and others. I think the challenges happen more in liberal arts, law, and journalism, in areas where Scopus is not that strong. Again, what we have done is work with senior professors who understand quality journals. I think we'll do a rough check with them. And any researcher in their field would know who the good journals are and who the predatory journals are. I think that might be a good way to do an acid test, to check it out with someone of repute.
Thank you. I recognize that we've run up against the time. I don't know whether my speakers have a few more minutes, given that we started late. Is that all right? Because I see that we had a couple of hands raised as well, and I didn't know whether we wanted to at least provide.
I think to the ones who have raised the hands, we can say that they can write their question in the chat box.
Sure. Please do so. Those of you who have your hands raised, if you could write your question, we will see if we can provide an answer to that.
Plagiarism, many people are asking how to, I mean, if the Turnitin is the only software or there are other good softwares to check the plagiarism.
The names are eluding me, but there are 3-4 softwares, and apart from Turnitin, if you give me a minute, I'll just check my email. I just got an email from a colleague of mine mentioning names of other softwares, but there are 3 or 4 high quality software for anti-plagiarism. Give me a minute, I'll get back on that, Pankaj.
Sure. Thank you. And of course, I should say that what will make all of this a bit challenging as well is that I know that the members of my association are always looking at ways to improve the peer review process. So for example, there are now many cases that you submit your paper and first someone in-house will run a check over many, many things, sometimes a list of 100 points first before it's ever sent to the editor or to a peer reviewer, so that we've already checked that the person sending this is in fact an individual, they come from a proper university, this is not plagiarized, and many, many other things. We're also, as publishers, many of my members are looking at how might they use AI tools to do a first scan of your submission to see that this is a proper and correct submission before. And all of this is about saving you as a peer reviewer some time so that you're not having to review things that are not serious. But that also might mean that the peer review times are shorter than they were in the past. And so short peer review times might not necessarily mean a predatory journal, though they could mean that. So it's important, as I think Catherine was saying, and to kind of summarize today's session, to really, when you think first about all of the things that we've talked about, what type of work is this? Do I know this journal? Think about that list that Think, Check, Submit and that Professor Kusla was sharing with you about things to think through before you submit that paper. So think about it, check the list before you submit. And things, as we say, will always be changing and developing, but it's really important that your quality work is published in a quality publication. And I think that's our most important takeaway for today. Might I also ask if there are any other final thoughts from my colleagues and panelists here today?
So both the speakers, would you like to say something before we end?
I was just going to say that just to remain hopeful and do what you do and believe in your research, and that the work that you're doing is very good, and it's just about where you're going to choose to share it with the world. And I know it can feel quite overwhelming and scary, and you're thinking, oh, is there anywhere that my work is going to be published? But good research will find a place in the world to be read. And so believe in the work that you're doing. And I thought the comments about working with different partners and collaborating with people, that there's just a lot of, good stuff going on, and, best of luck in your publication journey. But I hope you remain hopeful and positive about publishing. Try not to get too down, because I know it can feel quite stressful.
Dr. Atul?
I'll say first, be courageous. You've done some great work. You've spent a lot of time in your work. Don't be afraid of reaching out to the best journals, but you might need help. So don't be afraid of seeking help. Help from language editors, help from a peer group within your university, senior professors who could guide you, but also ensuring that you collaborate. Collaboration towards making sure that your publications are of the right quality and reaching out to the best journals. I think one more last thought. Typically, open access journals will have a price, will have a cost associated with it. And especially if you collaborate, and this is for my Indian friends, you'll see much more budgets with foreign scientists than you'll have. So your ability to get published in open access will also go up if you collaborate. So I will say be fearless, seek help, and collaborate.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Khosla. So we should be winding up, Caroline.
I agree.
I must say thanks to both the speakers, to Caroline, to the STM Think Check Summit for holding this webinar on behalf of AIU. I'm sure we'll be having many more in the series. And today's response was very good. And there were many questions that shows the interest of the audience towards these type of topics. And thank you very much. Over to Caroline. And in the end, Dr. Pani will be giving a vote of thanks.
Yes, and thank you again. We really want to thank Dr. Mittal of the Association of Indian Universities and all of our panelists today for this opportunity to meet with you. And we wish everyone the best with their work and publications.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Caroline. Thank you, Madam Dr. Mittal. It was a wonderfully enriching experience of all the speakers. First of all, let me recapitulate before going for the business of presenting the vote of thanks. Just let me recapitulate some of our discussions. Madam Dr. Mittal, esteemed Secretary General AIU, started giving us some statistics on the health of publication in our country. Where do we stand as compared to other countries? And then Madam Sutton about this webinar, giving a nice background, and of course the speaker, Madam Catherine, giving details of the nitty-gritty of drafting, writing, and identifying good journal, think, check, submit, and all these details. And of course, Professor Atul Khosla has given us all the details of how to build a research ecosystem, building research culture, for drafting a proposal, building the research stream, and so many entire things we have discussed today. And of course, I believe that much of the discussions have focused on the quality of publications and identifying the right journal and providing a right platform for publication to our young researchers. Thank you, Madam Caroline and STM, for really leading this show. And of course, Madam Dr. Mittal deserves all of our accolade for giving us leadership and inspiring us. And our speakers, Dr. Catherine and Professor Khosla, we are grateful indeed for sparing your time and enriching the experience of our audience. And Dr. Usha, Dr. Sandeep from AIU, they are the contribution needs to be acknowledged. Since beginning, they have been supporting us, and the technical team, those who have worked behind from the side of STM, and of course from the side of Dr. Atul Khosla and our technical team, all deserves thanks. And many thanks to all our audience, those who with a great deal of enthusiasm, they participated and took part in the discussions. And as Madam Secretary General has already informed, that in future we are going to hold a series of workshops specifically devoting on specific themes. Maybe we can near future or we plan to organize a workshop on plagiarism, especially devoted to plagiarism, and some other aspects that we will be planning with STM. So many thanks to all our people, those who logged on to this program. Thank you so much.